Hi guys, Aaron here with Ghost Raptor Gaming and Guns, and if True Lies is one of your favorite movies, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Guys, we have today the Ruger P89 up for review as used by Arnold Schwarzenegger in True Lies. Is it a good gun though? We're going to find out. So, first thing is first, we're going to do our safety checks. Magazine is empty, chamber is clear, and we are safe. So, second thing second, what is my relationship with Ruger? I don't have a relationship with Ruger. They've never sent me any of their products. I actually have this gun on loan from my father, so thanks, Pops. We're going to talk about the features and caveats of the features as we always do, front to back, top to bottom, as I go, starting with the sights, and then we'll talk about a couple other things later on. But let's talk about some basic features of the gun. It has a stainless steel slide, a cast investment aluminum frame. We have a 4.5 inch barrel, and the gun weighs 32 ounces, so it is a chunky bitch. That being said, sometimes heft is nice. So let's talk about the sights. They are a 3-dot variety. These have green paint in them. I have seen them with white and red paint as well, but this particular model has green paint. Now, the sights are a metal variety. They are drift adjustable for windage. They are not adjustable for elevation. The rear sight is trapezoidal in its shape. However, the actual sight notch and the front sight post are highly squared off. Equal height is easy to achieve, and they're pretty good sights. They're not night sights or anything like that, although I'm sure you can get upgrades for it if you want, but I have no issues with the sights. Unfortunately, the rear sight is kind of tapered off. It doesn't have a hard edge on it, so you cannot rack it on any hard surfaces should you need to. However, it is a functional sight, and this is very much a budget-minded gun. At the front of the slide, you will note that there are no front slide serrations. They weren't really a thing at that time. I mean, this thing actually was in the XM9 trials back in 1985. That's when the P85, which is just the blue model, was produced, and that's why it was produced. And of course, it had stiff competition with the 6-hour P226 and the Beretta 92, which it lost to, but I digress. No front slide serrations, however, there is just a little bit of a cut here, which you could use. Moving back from there, we do have your extractor. It is simply a piece of sheet metal. This is very much a budget-minded, simple-to-produce firearm, as Ruger intended. But I didn't have any issues with the extractor whatsoever. It does work quite well, at least in my shooting experience. Moving back from there, we don't have any rear slide serrations, if you've noticed. As I mentioned in my Smith & Wesson 6.906 review, I felt that the slide serrations on that particular pistol were unnecessary because when you manipulate the slide, you end up just grabbing the decocker tabs to actually rack the gun. And I think Ruger saw that and decided, hey, we're going to do the same thing. It has a decocker safety on here, and when you go to rack the gun, you just end up grabbing that decocker. So there's really no need for those slide serrations. I think Ruger recognized that and said, we're not going to bother doing it. It'll keep cost down. The decocker is right here, by the way. It is a decocker safety combination. It has some horizontal serrations on the tabs, which come out, protrude from the frame right there. It's easy to manipulate both on and off. It's not the most positive in the world, as you can probably just hear. That being said, it is functional, and I have no issues with it. It does disconnect the trigger, by the way, when the safety is on, and then when the safety is off, you have a double action, single action trigger, which we will get into in just a bit. Moving back from there, you do have the hammer. It's almost like a commander style of hammer. It has a large groove on the top, as well as some serrations on it, which makes it easy to cock or decock manually should you so choose. However, again, you have a decocker, so it's not really necessary. On the other side of the gun, we have our slide lock / slide release, whatever you want to call it. It is elongated, it's fairly thick, it protrudes fairly far away from the firearm. It has those horizontal serrations on it again, and I have no issues with it except for the little gripe that I always have of having small hands. I can't exactly hit that with my thumb without breaking my grip. As you can see right here, can't quite get it. I have to break my grip in order to hit it. That being said, that happens with a lot of firearms, and the way to remedy it is just when you reload, insert your magazine with your support hand, roll your support hand up, and depress it with your support hand thumb. And you can get really, really good at reloading quickly that way. So that's probably what I would recommend. And as far as the decocker, just to backtrack a little bit, I would recommend that you do, when you do load the gun, you decock it and then you take your safety off. That's how I would carry this particular firearm. Moving down, we do not have a Picatinny rail on the dust cover. Again, this is a cast aluminum frame, and PIC rails weren't super popular at the time on handguns. It was pretty few and far between that you saw them, so it's not on this gun. Moving back from there, we do have our trigger guard. It is elongated and it is hooked in front. However, there's no texturing on the front of the trigger guard. So if you have gloves on or anything like that, you should have no issues getting to that trigger. It is not undercut at all. As you can see in the back, it kind of tapers in from the rest of the frame, and that's about it. So no undercut there. We do have a fairly generous beaver tail, by the way, and it prevents hammer bite, slide bite, all that good stuff. So no issues there. The grips. Let's talk about the grips. Actually, let's talk about the magazine release first. So the magazine release is an ambidextrous magazine release. It does protrude from the firearm fairly far. It has some vertical serrations on it. It's a little stiff. It's not the easiest magazine release I've ever manipulated. So it is a little stiff. You do have to break your grip because it's not a traditional button press. You actually push it forward towards the muzzle of the firearm in order to get it to release. Mags do drop free, by the way. The only issue I have with it, despite the fact that I have to break my grip, is that due to the shape of it, it's not exactly the best gun for appendix carry. That being said, appendix carry wasn't a thing at the time this gun was designed. But while carrying it for the review, I did know while carrying appendix, occasionally, the front of my body, my appendix area, would push the magazine release. And what would end up happening is, because I did that, the magazine would kick out just a little bit, just like so. And then when I was about to get out of my car or stand up and would readjust it, I would realize, hey, this is poking out. You just got a quick slap to get that back in, and you are good to go. So an outside the waistband holster is probably a better option for this. This is how my father carries it. He carries it in a Galco leather outside the waistband holster at the 4 o'clock position, which is fairly typical for outside the waistband carry. Let's talk about the grips. So these are not the original factory grips on here. These are the original factory grips right here. And as you can see, there's really no texturing to them at all. They are Ruger branded. They look quite nice on the firearm. However, they're very smooth and they desperately needed to be replaced. The front strap and the back strap also have zero texturing to them. So it is a very smooth grip, very ergonomic, very comfortable to hold, but very, very smooth. So as a favor to my father, I replaced these grips, the original factory grips, with these Hogue mono grips with the finger grooves. Definitely a huge upgrade. It gives much better texturing and grip on both the sides, and especially on the front strap, which is really where the metal meets the meat. So going down from there, we do have a lanyard loop, and again, this was designed to be a military or service pistol, so it does have a lanyard loop right at the bottom of the grip, as many service pistols do. So if you want to put a leash on your gun, you can go ahead and do that. It's totally up to you, and it didn't get in the way of reloading or anything like that. The magazine well is not beveled at all. The magazines, which do drop free, are metal. They are made by Ruger, and by the way, they have this magazine catch notch right in the front, right here. Beretta 92 mags with that front notch will fit in the Ruger P89, and they will feed no problem. So I did get a couple Beretta 92 mags for a different project that I was working on, and I just happened to notice that they fit in here. I tested them out. They did feed totally fine. So the one feature that I need to cover now is the trigger. But before I do, if you like what you're seeing, feel free to comment, like, share, and subscribe. And of course, if you want to, you can leave a super thanks, which is just a tip option through YouTube. And you can also sign up for my Patreon. It's $1 a month, gets you some exclusive content like Q&As, that kind of thing. I'd really appreciate the support. Link in the description. So the trigger is a totally smooth face affair, no texturing of any kind. It doesn't have the hardest curve on it, but it's not a flat trigger by any means. Again, this is a double action, single action gun. So let's check out that trigger. So the trigger has about 2 millimeters of take up right here, and then you start stacking, and then you hit a wall almost all the way back, and then you have a fairly clean break right about there, and a reset for double action for whatever reason, if you need to know that, is all the way out. Right? So it breaks at probably 11 pounds. It's a fairly heavy double action trigger pull. It's definitely not the best, although it is smooth. I will give it that. It is pretty smooth. Now, once you fire it, it will go into single action mode, and then you have nothing but a single action trigger from there on out, unless you decock. Single action trigger isn't the best I've ever felt either. You have a little bit of take up, again about 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, and then you hit a fairly hard wall. And then you have a fairly clean break. Again, not the cleanest, it's not like glass breaking, but you do have a fairly clean break, and it comes in at about 5 pounds, 5.5 pounds. It's not the best trigger in the world, that's for sure. And then your reset, if you're into that, is right here, and it's basically all the way out. It's also not tactile or audible. Again, I'll play that one more time for you. Yeah, it's not tactile, it's not audible. There's like no reset on this thing. You just kind of have to let your finger off the trigger and continue firing from there. So the trigger isn't the best, but let's head on over to the table and we will talk about disassembly, reassembly, and accuracy of the firearm, and then we'll come back here and we'll talk about durability and reliability. So disassembly, reassembly of the Ruger P89 is a little different than you expect. However, it is sort of similar to a 1911 pistol. So simply remove the magazine to start with. After you've ensured that the firearm isn't loaded, you're going to want to lock your slide to the rear. Now, after you have the magazine removed and the slide locked to the rear, what you're going to want to do is look in the magazine well, and you'll actually see the ejector assembly right there. This is a piece of sheet metal, and you have to fold it down until it clicks in place. Once you have that done, pull back on your slide ever so slightly until your slide lock drops, and then you can actually remove it. Once that pops out, it is captive by the way, so it's not going to go anywhere. Once that's out, allow the slide to come forward and then push it off of the frame. And it has a non-captive guide rod assembly with a fairly stiff spring, so be careful here. And it has this aluminum guide rod with this bit of a bulge on the end. Now you can lift up this barrel up and out, and the gun is completely disassembled and ready to be serviced. There are some weight machine marks in here, as you can see, of the overall quality, but it is still fairly good. And let's just take a look at the frame. As you can see here, there's that ejector housing that you needed to fold down, or I should say ejector assembly that you had to fold down, and the quality of a cast aluminum frame is about as good as you can expect. Reassembly is the exact opposite. Simply take your slide, drop your barrel into said slide, and it will drop down and lock into place. Make sure that your linkage right here is in this position. It's going to make things a lot easier. Insert your guide rod and your recoil spring assembly, and then you're going to want to push that forward and lock it in place. Again, it's a little tricky because this is an older design. And the recoil spring is fairly stiff. There we go, right there. And as you can see, the nib on the end of the recoil, or I should say the guide rod, snapped into that groove where your barrel linkage is right here. So again, a little more intense than your standard kind of disassembly reassembly, but not too terribly difficult. The next thing you need to do is obviously line up these slide rails onto the blocking block here, and you're going to push this back, and then you're going to want to pull it back until you have this kind of lined up like so, and then you can push in your slide lock. That will actually lock it in place, and then of course you can do your function checks. Now remember, when you insert the magazine, what this will do is it will actually push that ejector assembly back up, but if you want to, you can simply do it by hand. You just pull it up until it snaps in place. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Again, function check. Reinsert your magazine, and you're good to go. So let's talk about the accuracy of the Ruger P89. How about pretty dang good? This is me standing 7 yards. This is the first time in years I have fired this gun, and here are my first scoops with it. Just over an inch. This is bad. There's a little bit of vertical stringing. That's just me. How about a 1 inch group right there? Just over 1 inch there. And then again, this isn't the best group in the world, but considering the fact that I fired 2 1 inch groups, almost 3 1 inch groups right off the bat after not having shot this gun for several years, I would say that the accuracy is really superb. Okay, so as you can see, the disassembly or reassembly of the firearm has its finer nuances, but is really not that bad. You can also see that it's very much a budget-minded gun. However, it doesn't mean that the quality necessarily suffered as a result, and the accuracy of this gun is outstanding. 1 inch groups were very easy to achieve, and it's a very soft shooting pistol, by the way. One of the softest shooting 9mm I've ever fired, and it's probably due to its heavier weight and its slide, as well as the fact that its action is a little clunky in the regards that its lockup is very tight. So, you know, overall, shooting it was fine. I did note, again, novice shooters may experience some limp wristing, resulting in failures to eject. However, with a little bit of practice, that will go away. I actually had a new shooter shoot this gun with me, and initially he had some limp wristing issues, but then once I talked him through it, he didn't have that problem anymore, and overall reliability is through the roof on this gun. My father bought this gun for himself when he was 16. When I was 16, I am now 34. So he's had this gun for a long time and has had almost no issues with it. We put about 2,500 rounds through it before we had any issues, and it was a simple fix. The recoil spring was just worn out, and I replaced it with an 11-pound recoil spring from Wolf. They're still available, and they run about $8. Since then, again, no problems, and this thing is approaching about 4,000 rounds. So, hey man, if you can go 2,500 rounds without having any problems with a handgun, it's a pretty dang reliable handgun, and I would recommend it. Again, it is big, it is rather heavy, but it is very soft shooting, very accurate, and very reliable. As well as budget-minded, you can pick these up used for about $300. I've seen some of them go for like $250. So, hey, I mean, you can do a hell of a lot worse. Is it the best gun for carrying in a modern context? Well, no, it doesn't have your front slide serrations if you're into that kind of thing. It doesn't have an optics cut. It doesn't have an accessory rail. It doesn't have the best trigger in the world. So it's not like this, you know, newfangled piece of technology making it the best gun to carry. However, it will definitely get the job done, and I wouldn't feel undergunned with this whatsoever. So I think that about covers the Ruger P89. I recommend it. This has been Aaron with Ghost Raptor Gaming and Guns. Have a nice day.
Have a lovely day, asshole.